So, Romney lost. Yeah, I'm kind of relieved about that. I was born and raised LDS, and I know the mindset behind the LDS perspective on religion, God, and politics. There's the white horse prophecy that Joseph Smith, talked about, which basically said in the last days the Constitution would be hanging by a thread, and more or less there would be a Mormon leader rise to power and deliver the United States from the corruption and the bondage, and more or less prepare it for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And for those of you who aren't aware of the LDS philosophy, they believe that their church is 100% true, and that they're the only true and living church on the face of the earth, and that all other churches are an abomination in the sight of God, and that in fact it's taught in the LDS Church that the Catholic Church is the great and abominable church spoken of in Revelations. So, when having been LDS myself and having known the conviction that the LDS people have, and having convinced myself wholly and utterly that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was the only true and living church on the face of the earth, I saw what was happening in the LDS community as Romney was preparing to take presidency. They saw this as a true sign of the times, and they saw it as basically the fulfillment of the white horse prophecy. Now, that alone is dangerous in my mind. That in and of itself is an extremely dangerous concept that is perpetuated and that was understood and kept pretty much to the church, but that's what was going through every single member's mind as Romney was, going through his, preparation to become president of the United States. Now, what really frightened me, and you have to understand that I still love, my family. I still love the LDS faith. I still have an affinity for the LDS faith, simply because it was the religion I was born into and grew up in, and so I sympathize with them and kind of feel bad for them through this election. However, I'm relieved that Romney did not win. The reason being is first of all what I had just previously explained. They believe full-heartedly that they are the true and living church, the only true and living church on the face of the earth, and that Romney's election and pretty much receiving of the presidential chair is the fulfillment of the white horse prophecy. Second of all is that Romney himself is a Mormon. He's an LDS member, and he is convinced that he also was a fulfillment of that prophecy. And not only that, he was convinced that his religion is the only true and living church on the face of the earth now. If he had won, just imagine this, if he had won, and he stepped into power, and he became the President of the United States, believing that he himself and the church that he belonged to is the only true and living church and is the only conduit through which God speaks doctrine and commands the world. A man having such conviction and faith in his own ability to acquire true knowledge and prophecy from God himself directly, through the prophet of the church and through himself personally, would believe that his ascent into presidency was God's will and was his calling, and that any decision he made would be God's will. That's dangerous. That's really treading some scary ground. If we look back through history, we'll see a ridiculous amount of instances where a man who believed he was called of God and got into a political position of power and believed that he was in there by the will of the Lord and through divine influence. When we see this in history, it has always ended bad. It's always been a really, really bad and poor ending. And to an LDS person, they don't see it that way. To an LDS person, they see it as, we finally have a true man of God who belongs to the true church in power, and he's going to save this country. However, not everybody's LDS, and not everybody sees it that way. And to an outsider, or to a person not of the LDS faith, they see a man who is about to embark on the very same cycle that we have seen happen over and over and over in history, that has always ended in wars and contention and famine and political problems and economic turmoil. And so I just am relieved, and you all should be too. And I don't think too many people, too many Americans or members of the United States of America really understood that aspect, that they were voting for Romney. They believed they were voting for a man of God, when in fact in Romney's eyes, they're just as apostate and lost as say a Satanist, or, well, that's kind of an extreme, or an agnostic or an atheist. And that could have really been bad. He would have pushed his religious ideals because he would have felt that his calling would be to straighten out America, to bring it back into the fold of God's sheep, and that would have spawned him to, he would have prayed about vetoing certain bills and passing certain bills, and he would have prayed about it, and he would have gotten that, that warm burning in the bosom, as they call it, and he would have taken that as an answer directly from God. Whereas, the burning in the bosom is such a widespread phenomenon. Everybody in every religion has a burning in the bosom, and I don't think it is necessarily an indication of God speaking to us, but rather an emotional response to whether or not you want what you're praying about to be, whether or not you want it to be true or legitimate, or whether you want to subconsciously believe that that is the desire of God. And I think that if more people would have understood what was really going on in Romney's head and what was really going on throughout every single LDS person's mind, they would have been a little bit more skeptical and a little bit more wary of actually voting for Romney. The next thing I wanted to bring up is that since the election, many LDS people have seen they saw this, very, very close election. It was almost straight down the middle. And they saw that Obama won instead of Romney. And trust me, in an LDS person's eyes, Obama is the literal incarnation of Satan. And so when you see what is going on in an LDS person's mind, and especially in Romney's mind, as this is all happening, and then Romney loses, well, this is no longer God's will that Romney acquire the presidential seat and lead the country back into God's good graces. But now this is a sign of God that the United States is too far gone. There's too much evil in our country, and there's too much wickedness and too much sin, and that to them now this is a sign that it's over, that the United States is going to fall, that there is no recourse, there is no salvation for our country, and we are going to basically collapse and have, Armageddon's going to set in, World War III, whatever else. Now, they believe this to the core. So not only would it have been extremely dangerous had Romney gained a presidential seat, but now it is extremely dangerous because most of the LDS population, not all, but a very good chunk of them, now believe that this is a literal sign, and they believe this with all their hearts, that this is a sign of the end times. Psychological impact of that, because this isn't just an LDS mindset now. Now this is what several LDS people believe, as well as the majority of Christian voters who voted for Romney. So we have a good chunk of the United States mentally preparing for Christian Armageddon. So, I think it's kind of a catch-22, but at the same time, I think it's better that we have half of the U.S. believe that we're about to head into some biblical turmoil and of disasters and famines and wars of biblical proportion, than actually have a man who believes that he was given the presidential seat, basically handed the seat from the hand of God, by God, to re-steer and redirect the country back into righteousness. But that's my take on the whole matter, and it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. I love the LDS people. I really do. I think let them do their thing. They're good people. Many of them are very good people. They really believe in doing good to man, and even though not all of them really follow that paradigm, most of them actually turn an awkward eye to non-members. Only on the surface do they, deep down inside, they believe that they are going to be saved and everybody else is going to go to hell. Now a member would recant with, well, there is baptism for the dead, but that's besides the point. To them, they are God's chosen, and they are the ones that are going to be saved. And this is just kind of a little bit of a hairy situation, but we'll see how it plays out. But I'm relieved. I'm relieved that Romney didn't win. So that's my little spiel on the matter, and I just kind of wanted to let people know what was really at stake and what still is at stake now that we have so many people believing so sincerely that this was it, that this was the last chance that our country had, and now we're headed for a certain disaster. I think that mindset itself, with such zeal, could prove to be disastrous and actually end up being something of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So anyway, sorry for the long video. I will see everybody later. Bye-bye.